Hey guys, tonight we're signing up for something you definitely haven't seen on TV, unless you've been watching documentaries at 2 a.m., which honestly, fair. We're plunging right into the bizarre, stressful, and sometimes surprisingly hygienic world of Aztec priests. That's right. The original overachievers, alarm clock aficionados, and lifetime members of the Please Gods, Don't Smite Us Club. Before we tumble headfirst into a day packed with drama, incense, and at least one very awkward temple robe, don't forget to like this video and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy hanging out here. Pop into the comments and let me know what you're doing while you listen. Folding laundry? Avoiding laundry? Performing, hopefully not, minor open heart surgery. Now, do us both a favor. Dim those lights, turn on a fan to drown out the neighbor's dog, and grab something soft to hug while I spiral into historic absurdity. Let's chew on some questions. Have you ever wondered what it's like to set an alarm at 4 a.m.? Not for CrossFit, but to greet a sun god. Could you start your morning by sprinkling incense instead of coffee and not lose your mind? How much bloodletting does it take for HR to step in? And what happens if you turn up to work without your ceremonial headdress? Could you keep a straight face during human sacrifice when your main worry is keeping bird droppings off your fancy feather cape? Congratulations. You've just woken up in Tenochtitlán, 1481. Your calendar is confusing, your neighbors are loud, and you're already late for a sunrise sacrifice. Good luck. There's no snooze button in the Great Temple, next Temple District. Just a choir of conch shells and the thick scent of morning incense. As an Aztec priest, you rise with the sun or clouds. Either way, you're up, because the gods have very strong opinions about punctuality, and you do not want to get on their bad side before breakfast. The day kicks off with a performance that leaves no room for late risers. First, there's the trilling sound of the ayakashtli, a gourd rattle, quickly followed by the deep, hollow bellow of a conch horn echoing around the stone courtyards. This is less of a gentle wake-up and more of a time to make sure the sun keeps rising kind of alarm. Forget your cozy duvet. Your mattress is probably a reed mat, and comfort is, well, relative. You sniff the air to ground yourself. Cedar and copal resins smolder in the braziers, their resinous perfume curling through the dawn haze. This smoky scent is your caffeine. Around you, the other priests are already shuffling around, adjusting feathered cloaks and embroidered loincloths, muttering prayers or trying to discreetly rub face paint off their noses. You note, again, that the concept of morning breath was clearly torment gifted by the gods. Now it's about getting ready for temple duty. No time for a leisurely shower. Instead, you scoop cold water over your head, shivering as it wakes you up far too effectively. Personal hygiene is a spiritual matter, so you take a moment to scrub your hands and mouth with salt and herbs, an act both pious and practical. Your fellow priests do the same, some more enthusiastically than others, usually depending on who drew the short straw for late watch last night. You dress carefully. Aztec textiles are a declaration of rank as much as comfort. If you're important, your cotton cloak might be brightly dyed and patterned with geometric jaguars or serpents. If you're less celebrated, you make do with plain maguey fibre. Fastening your garment with a carved bone pin, you try not to think about the looming lists of daily rituals and responsibilities. You know they're waiting for you, along with the gods' hungry eyes. Breakfast is not, strictly speaking, an indulgence. A thick gruel of amaranth or maize, perhaps flecked with chili or squash seeds, is handed to you by a temple servant. It's hearty, but also humble, the kind of meal that means business, not brunch with friends. You eat quickly, awkwardly balancing the bowl while reviewing the morning ceremonies in your head. Did you remember the right order for the incense offerings? Which god expects blood today, and will it be yours? All around, Tenochtitlan is stretching awake. The city's canoes are already gliding through its web of canals. Market vendors rattle their baskets, preparing for a day of organized chaos. Somewhere, a noble shouts at a servant for mixing up cocoa beans. Yet the temple district is its own world, a place suspended between breakfast and the infant. You head toward the pyramid steps, heart a little unsteady. The stone is cool beneath your bare feet. Up close, the carvings along the staircases seem to glare at you, eyes wide, fangs bared, as if silently checking your spiritual credentials. Another priest passes, gives you a look that says, "Yes, I'm tired too." And you both exchange grim little nods of solidarity, because in Tenochtitlan, there's only so much comfort in a morning routine. The day starts early, the gods are demanding, and the city expects you at your best, whether you're ready or not. With incense swirling and conches wailing, you take a deep breath. The morning is yours to navigate, one uncertain step and prayer at a time. Nothing says power like a carefully arranged feather headdress and an embroidered cloak, but good luck explaining to the tailor that you need extra room for dramatic gestures. You wrap yourself in layers of symbolism, then pray you don't spill anything sacrificial before noon. Fashion, for the ancient priesthood, was hardly a matter of personal style. It was a public performance stitched into every hem, bead, and bead of sweat that trickled down one's back under those ceremonial robes. Each piece was loaded with cosmic significance, from colors that warded off evil spirits to geometric patterns that mapped the path to the afterlife. Robes weren't just clothing, they were wearable theology. One misplaced tassel, and suddenly you're at risk of invoking rain during wedding season. Imagine the pressure, trying to make sure your cloak is both seasonally appropriate and cosmically aligned, all while hoping the sacred thread count matches the deity's expectations. The headdress, meanwhile, was less a hat and more an architectural statement. Balancing a crown of gold, feathers, or sometimes antlers, meant risking a sore neck and, possibly, dignity if things started to tilt mid-ritual. Some cultures would add veils, jewel-encrusted bands, or, if you were lucky, havens for the occasional nesting bird. These embellishments weren't just for show. They broadcast status, divine favor, and possibly also a willingness to endure minor head trauma for one's faith. In fact, the more unwieldy or outrageous your ceremonial headdress, the more certain the crowd was that divine mysteries must be involved. Why else would anyone subject themselves to 3 pounds of ostrich plumes unless the gods had a direct line to your wardrobe? Of course, with great power comes great dry cleaning anxiety. Ancient fashion may have looked immortal, but the reality was anything but. Sacred robes, typically woven from rare and easily stained materials, operated under a strict "don't ask, don't splatter" policy. Spilling ceremonial wine brought not only the threat of divine displeasure, but also the risk of sparking a sartorial scandal. Did you hear? The high priest has a pomegranate blotch. Gossip in the temple was as quick as it was merciless, with every new moon bringing fresh critique on whose fringe twinkled most piously, or whose linen was dangerously close to off-white. And let's not forget the process of dressing itself, a true test of patience and dexterity. Putting on sacred vestments involved layers upon layers, each requiring precise folding and fastening. The morning routine wasn't so much getting ready as enacting a slow-motion magic trick, part origami, part ritual, and always under the gaze of junior attendants and possibly a nervous goat. Forget a single knot, and you might spend the rest of the ceremony discreetly adjusting your tunic while composing silent prayers for a wardrobe malfunction-free procession. But it wasn't all solemnity and stains. Occasionally, fashion panic produced unexpected creativity. With ceremonial garments often handed down or collectively maintained, priests developed a robust skill for patching, repairing, and, when inspiration struck, upcycling a faded stole into next season's must-have shoulder drape. If necessity is the mother of invention, then temple laundries were the birthplace of proto-couture. All this high-stakes costuming reflected a simple, enduring truth. Clothing wasn't just about marking out the sacred, it was about transforming the wearer, and by extension, the entire community, into something worthy of their god's attention. When robes swept through the courtyard and headdresses claimed slices of skyline, it was a sign that ordinary life was pausing, if only for a heartbeat, to play at being extraordinary. No pressure, of course. Just balance the sacred and the stylish. And whatever you do, don't trip over the hem. Who needs hot showers when you've got the sacred steam bath? Or temazcal, a sort of sauna, sort of cosmic reset. Today's goal, scrub off last night's ceremonial snacks and try to ignore your aching knees. Step 1. Before sunrise, with the stone altar still cool and the village thick with the smell of damp earth, you shuffle barefoot toward the temazcal. Picture it. A beehive-shaped hut, thick with the memory of generations, built low and snug to the ground, its doorway barely tall enough for a toddler in training sandals. If you're lucky, an apprentice has already kindled the sacred fire. If not, it's your turn to fumble blindly with flint and wish you'd paid more attention to that fire-starting 101 lesson during priest camp. Inside, the ritual unfolds. The air is heavy. Steam rolls off hot stones, mingling with the pungent aromas of sage and copal. Forget quick and clinical soap. Here, purification is a full sensory, head-to-toe affair. Your skin prickles, eyes water. With every breath, your pores open wider, as if the universe wants to wring out your soul via your sweat glands. This isn't just about physical cleanliness, mind you. The temazcal is equal parts bathhouse and spiritual forge. Here, the daily grime, dirt, worries, embarrassing memories of last night's chant-off with the new junior priest are all supposed to dissolve together. The high priests swear that every drop of sweat carries away spiritual impurity, and possibly last week's regrettable refried bean binge. Phase 2. If you're particularly dedicated, you might mix ash and a scrub of ground maize to exfoliate, scraping away the day-old sins with as much gusto as your half-asleep limbs will muster. Traditionalists prefer aromatic herbs rubbed into the skin, believing they balance not just body and mind, but the very forces that hold the calendar in place and stop the gods from inventing Mondays. Meanwhile, your companions don't exactly respect the silent meditation part of the ritual. Expect a few groans, some competitive sweating, and at least one elder muttering about the new moon's unusual humidity. In this context, camaraderie is just another layer of the process. You are cleansed not just by steam, but by the low-grade ribbing that comes with group purification. Proof that spiritual enlightenment may, in fact, require a sense of humour. The transition from the temazcal to the world feels less like leaving a bathroom and more like leaving the womb. Blinding sun, cool air, the sensation of shoes as a new technology. You notice the change immediately. Every ache, every bit of tension seems diffused, if only for a moment, by the ritual. Is it magic, or just the triumph of heat over sore muscles? The wise don't ask. They just enjoy a fleeting sense of physical optimism before the realities of the day set in. Next up, a ritual face wash in the courtyard fountain. Colder than a mountain spring and approximately as refreshing. With hands cup-shaped and trembling, you splash water over sleep-blurred features and realize, not for the first time, that the path to spiritual purity is paved with soggy sleeves. There are prayers for this too, quick blessings against vanity, fatigue, and presumably impending head colds. Finally, there's the sacred wardrobe. Vestments brushed and donned with practiced care, each layer serving as both armor and canvas for the day's intentions. This, the high priests say, is the last line of hygiene defense. A reminder, perhaps, that spiritual authority demands attention to detail, meticulous as the patterns on a priest's ceremonial sash. By the time you join the others in the temple forecourt, the transformation is almost complete. You are clean, body, mind, and reasonably soiled tunic, ready to face whatever the gods or the temple kitchen can throw at you next. Your breakfast, a mix of amaranth, maize, and the nagging suspicion something special is about to happen. Because nothing says normal work day like sharing a meal with your fellow priests while discussing omens, dreams, and occasionally yesterday's neighborhood quarrel. You sit cross-legged on a woven mat as the first light seeps through the open stone lattice. The aroma of toasted amaranth mingles with wood smoke, drifting upward in lazy spirals. Today, the food is simple but sacred. Each bite, a chance for silent gratitude or furtive speculation. Across from you, Tenochtitlán wrinkles his nose, breaking a hushed silence. "Did you see the serpents in the calendar last night?" he whispers. A few heads nod, others groan. You all carry the same weighty apprehension of signs and portents. Breakfasts in Tenochtitlán are communal affairs, a blend of ceremony and gossip. The maize porridge is earthy, grounding, and somehow it tastes different depending on the mood. Is today heavy with the memory of last night's lunar eclipse? Or light with the prospect of market day? On the reed mat beside you, Xochitl pours a bowl of chocolatl and cracks a joke about the god's sense of humour. If they want us up before sunrise, could they not at least send us better weather? The laughter is quiet, but genuine, softening the sharp edges of early morning. Between mouthfuls, a wooden bowl passes, filled with tamales wrapped in corn husks. Priests hold their slices reverently, mindful that even the act of eating is an offering. You chew thoughtfully, letting the flavours mingle with the chatter surrounding you. Debates about the quality of yesterday's rain, whispered speculation about a hawk's unusual path, all blending into the symphony of priestly banter. A short silence falls as the Tlaloc priest, keeper of rain and thunder, recites a fragment of last night's dream. Everyone waits. Dreams in this room are more than stories. They're warnings, promises, or riddles wrapped in feathered cloaks. A jaguar, pacing the great temple steps, he declares, voice trembling with import. You swallow, unsure if your own dreams are too mundane to mention. As the interpretation begins, each priest contributes, a river of knowledge and superstition that never quite runs clear. The priest's breakfast is also a time for reflection and subtle rivalry. The elder, whose hair is streaked with moon silver, recounts a dispute between two families near the market. The lesson: all things are seen, nothing is forgotten. These discussions twist and turn like the canals outside, looping back to the night's omens, darting forward to afternoon ceremonies, yet always landing somehow on the present moment, here, together, sharing food and fate. A playful nudge draws your gaze. Do you remember the time the temple rats stole the offering cakes? Grins Teotl, the youngest priest, around a mouthful of maize. Laughter bubbles up again, memories shared as easily as bowls are passed. Even in a world of strict ritual, there is always space for small rebellions and fleeting joy. As the meal nears its end, the conversations grow quieter, tinged with the gravity of duty. Steam curls from the last cup of chocolate. Shadows retreat from the corners as the sun climbs higher. You gather your things: prayer beads, feathers, a handful of amaranth for the midday ritual, feeling a little steadier, fortified not just by food, but by company and tradition. Stepping out into the waking world of Tenochtitlán, you sense the city inhaling. A city alive with anticipation, restless and resplendent. Your breakfast might be humble, but you eat it as the brave do, in the company of those who see the world as you do, bound by ritual, memory, and a hint of laughter. And as the last echoes of conversation fade, you realize every morning here is a mystery, and every breakfast the prelude to legend. Let me know if you want any changes or additional elements tailored from the original transcripts. Ever tried to make weekend plans around 3 separate calendars? Welcome to your new world, where the sun, moon, and Venus are in an eternal tug of war, and only the priesthood's cryptic calculations keep anyone from panicking about the end of days. Picture this. It's a pleasant Thursday in ancient Mesoamerica. Or is it actually Sunday? Or Tracina 7 Monkey? Depending on who you ask, you're either right on time for the Festival of the Feathered Serpent, or you've accidentally committed a minor sacrilege by eating breakfast on an unlucky day. The Maya, ever masters of cosmic scheduling, operated with not one, but 3 totally different calendars: the solar harb, the ceremonial tzolkin, and the massive long count, which basically functions as the epoch time of Mesoamerica. Imagine syncing your work calendar, your social calendar, and a centuries-long company outcome tracker. Without Google, the solar harb is straightforward: 18 months of 20 days, plus a villainously suspicious, nameless week of 5 days at the end. If you're superstitious, you might want to call in sick for those 5 bad luck days, a tradition that suspiciously persists in spirit every time anyone faces a meeting on a Friday afternoon. Then there's the tzolkin, a 260-day round, whose real function seems to be give priests extra job security. Born, married, sneezed, stubbed your toe. The tzolkin's got an answer about whether it was auspicious or an absolute disaster, usually delivered in elegantly vague language. Of course, the crown jewel of cosmic confusion has to be the long count, the Mayan calendar, that got blamed for the world ending in 2012. In reality, this system is like the odometer on your car, relentlessly ticking upward through eras, centuries, and millennia. Instead of bringing about apocalypse, it mostly brings about headaches for archaeologists and history podcasters trying to convert cartoons and backtoons into something vaguely resembling October 23rd, probably. And just when you think you've got the hang of it, you're reminded that, actually, rulers would sometimes just fudge the dates on monuments for maximum political effect. So next time you're confused by modern politicians moving deadlines, just know that's a tradition nearly as old as time itself. Did people complain? Of course they did. Ancient Maya scribes etched out bitter laments about ominous days and calendar confusion. You can practically hear the groans of ancient party planners. What do you mean the Great Fire Ceremony and the rain god's picnic fall on the same day again? The result? A society with the organizational anxiety of a modern-day office, trying to reconcile budgets at both the end of fiscal Q4 and a new project kickoff. All of it run, not by HR, but by priestly mathematicians who, let's be honest, loved the drama. Still, the calculus behind these calendars wasn't merely academic. People believed that each date carried the weight of cosmic fate. You might think Mercury in retrograde makes for a rough month, but try picking a wedding date when every 13th day carries a subtle threat of war, famine, or an ill-advised haircut. Society, in turn, developed a robust calendar-based meme culture, written in glyphs but still, with jokes and complaints making it all the way onto painted vases and carved lintels. The stars and the complaints were a constant. Yet against this existential scheduling chaos, something remarkable happened. The Maya population, on the whole, adapted. Life carried on. Crops were planted on the right days, well, mostly. The right ceremonies happened at the right times, unless a priest got the numbers wrong. And when in doubt, folks just thanked the gods and tried not to think about the next calendar turnover. Perhaps that's the real ancient legacy. Complaining about confusing calendars is, and forever shall be, a universal experience. So, next time you're lost between Google Calendar invites, Outlook pop-ups, and the mysterious whims of Mercury, just remember, it could be worse. You could be tracking 3 cosmic cycles with nothing but a bark paper codex, a piece of charcoal, and an overwhelming sense of impending doom. Or as the Maya might say, happy forik and best of luck. As you prep the first offerings of the day, you realize nobody ever taught you how to handle a sacred obsidian blade with trembling hands, especially not before coffee. Good thing you're surrounded by equally anxious colleagues. There's something about 5:35 a.m. temple air that smells like burnt incense, dew-soaked limestone, and existential dread. You shuffle in with the other acolytes, robes slightly askew, feet dragging across mosaic tiles that tell stories of blood and glory none of you quite believe you'll live up to. The elders expect reverence and precision, but your mind is still busy calculating how many minutes until the sun cracks above the columns and you're officially allowed a sip from the communal brew pot. Until then, you fake confidence the way everyone else does. By murmuring ancient verses you only half remember, and clinging a little too tightly to your ceremonial sash. Today, you get the honor of prepping the sacrificial altar. This involves more logistics than you expected when you first took your sacred vows. The marble must be scrubbed spotless, then adorned with fresh marigolds and cobs of maize, each arranged in precise concentric circles. All of it will swirl together in the soft gold of dawn. Task by task, you move with practiced awkwardness, hoping your hands don't betray a rookie's nerves. Every offering must be measured, every cloth wrinkle smoothed, meant to signify a soul untroubled by doubt. There's irony in how much backstage chaos it takes to stage a scene of transcendental peace. Meanwhile, the senior priest floats in, equal parts serene and intimidating, his obsidian blade glinting in the lamplight. He asks if you're ready, his tone gentle, but his eyes painfully alert for mistakes. You manage a polite nod, even as your pulse hammers in your ears. Nobody in training mentioned how heavy ritual knives would feel, or how light you'd feel in their presence, like some part of you could vanish if the morning goes wrong. The tools of supposed divine favor don't ask how your night was, or whether you remember all the steps. They just wait, cold and expectant. That's when the camaraderie of your fellow acolytes really matters. Someone, probably Beck, always good in a crisis, slides a steaming cup your way, breaking protocol but saving your focus. Someone else cracks a joke about the time an intern nearly dropped the sacred bowl and tried to pass it off as an interpretive flourish. You share a smile, suddenly steadier as you recall all the times you've survived mornings just like this one. The elders call for silence, and everyone lines up, hands tucked at their waists, eyes lowered with just enough humility to please, but not so much as to draw attention. You draw a deep breath, settle your grip on the ritual blade, and recite the opening incantation. For a minute, The world shrinks to the geometry of offerings and the echo of your own voice bouncing off ancient stones. You can almost believe this moment matters, not just to the gods, if they're watching, but to everyone gathered here, playing their part. By the time the sun rises and the first rays scatter red across the altar, you've made it through. The offerings gleam. The flowers are perfect. Nobody bled on their shoes. You've fumbled through another morning, pulled upright by ritual and the secret kinship of people doing hard things together. And now, as everyone exhales, you realize sacrifice at dawn is less an act of heroism and more the art of surviving discomfort together before the coffee kicks in. Here's the part everyone whispers about at dinner: human sacrifice. It's a high-pressure gig with a big crowd and zero margin for error. Sure, it's sacred, but it's also guaranteed to ruin your manicure. The moment you step onto that freshly swept stone platform, all eyes are on you, not just from down below, but from the grandstands packed with local dignitaries, visiting dignitaries, and probably a few gods just checking in to see if you're doing it right. The tension is palpable. Think of it as a sold-out concert, if the performers were also the main event and the closing act. Preparation for such a spectacle is itself a ritual. The priests, often starved for days to sharpen their senses and maybe their cheekbones, would strategically choose auspicious days for these events. The timing was believed to align with cosmic cycles, so that not only was everyone down on Earth impressed, but the sun, moon, and the ancestral spirits up above would feel honored, and maybe a little appeased. But the pressure wasn't just on the planners. If you were involved in any way, from the top priest to the drummer keeping the pace steady, your family's reputation was on the line. And it's not just about the actual moment of sacrifice. There's the choreography. Everyone knows their marks. Flower bearers, musicians, the person fanning smoke across the altar to look mysterious. Miss a cue, trip on the steps, or drop a sacred tool, and you'll be the subject of awkward marketplace gossip until the next eclipse. Imagine having to explain at the corner tamale stand. Yes, I was the one who lost the sacred knife. No, it's not as easy as it looks. Of course, the person at the center of it all, the one about to be sacrificed, wasn't just picked at random. Far from it. In many cultures, these individuals were prepped like celebrities. They might be dressed in elaborate robes or body paint, paraded through town, and told they're about to do something incredibly important for which they'll be remembered forever. Whether or not they also got shaky knees at the last minute, well, who wouldn't? It's worth mentioning that, despite Hollywood's flair for the dramatic, most historic records agree, these rituals weren't about cruelty for its own sake. In their world, sacrifice meant a gift of unimaginable value, a chance to keep the world turning, the rains falling, or the crops growing. The stakes were cosmic. Mess this up, and you risk drought, famine, or cosmic embarrassment. In the chronicles written centuries later, you sense the careful, almost legalistic attention paid to getting each step exactly right. Sacrifice wasn't improvised. It was rehearsed and repeated, season after season, generation after generation. After the act, when the smoke coiled through the plaza and the drums faded away, everyone had their own role in the aftermath. Priests conducted purification ceremonies. The crowd dissolved into hushed groups, and elaborate feasts were held, but perhaps with less appetite than usual. You never knew if the gods were satisfied, so the tension didn't fully let up until the next harvest, or outbreak, was avoided. Success was rarely declared publicly, in case the weather changed its mind later, and those who presided over the rituals, they might spend the next weeks fasting and praying, hoping they hadn't overlooked some tiny sacred detail. Even legends need to sleep with one eye open. In the end, sacrifice was a social glue, a high-stakes drama, and a source of endless speculation. Did you see what the priest was wearing? Was the smoke blue enough? Did the earth tremble a little, or was that just your uncle's stomach? Even when it was over, the sacrifice situation lingered in whispers and stories, keeping everyone just a bit on edge until the next big day. No wonder it's the part nobody forgets, if only because they're all praying they're not up next. Sacred doesn't mean tidy, especially after an enthusiastic offering session. You grab your broom, decorated, of course, and get to work. Somehow, cleaning blood off basalt is not covered in the training manual. Here's the unsung truth of temple stewardship. You are now a caretaker, part priest, part junior janitorial staff, whether you aspire to divine communion or not. The divine may bring inspiration, but it tends not to sweep up wax drippings, petals, or the odd chicken feather from last night's ecstatic ritual. Even in sacred space, entropy is alive and well, and it is your calling to bring order out of this blessed chaos. If there's incense ash in your hair or honey pooled ominously under the altar, you are doing it right. Let's be clear. This isn't a chore. It's a rite. Ritual maintenance is an overlooked but profound piece of spiritual practice. As you scrub away last night's wine stains, you are not just restoring order, you're honoring the energy lingering in every corner. Those crumbs, a memory of offerings given in earnest, the faint or not so faint smell of singed rosemary, a fragrance woven with devotion. Each sweep of the broom is a conversation. Thank you for being here. I respect you enough not to leave you sticky. Of course, spiritual cleaning bears little resemblance to its purely mundane cousin. Why settle for lemon-scented spray when you could brew cleansing water steeped with frankincense and marjoram? Why just dust when you can drum, chant, and usher away last week's energies with a bit of theatre? Your work is half domestic, half ceremonial. Flick droplets of blessed water, murmur words of gratitude, and see each surface gleam a little brighter. Not just with cleanliness, but with intention. Sacred space responds when we treat it with reverence. Here's where the magic deepens. Every gesture can become spiritual. The weight of the broom in your hand, the rhythmic sweepings, even the stubborn spots that never quite come up, all present an invitation to mindfulness. The ancient temple keepers knew this well. They spoke prayers as they polished bronze, humming invocations while rearranging offerings. Their labor was not separate from petition or praise. It was embedded within it. You can do the same. If you notice resentment bubbling up, why am I always the one cleaning up this dried goat's milk? Pause and transform that energy into devotion. Even annoyance can be composted into gratitude, eventually. And remember, leave a trace, not a mess. Sacred spaces carry echoes of what happens within them. A too sterile altar feels empty. A neglected one, unwelcoming. The key is to maintain the temple as living, a place where spirit and dust coexist, neither overshadowing the other. You are not striving for magazine perfection, but for an environment where both gods and humans might linger. Sometimes a glint of candle wax in a corner hints at joy far better than a spotless surface ever could. As you work, be attentive to changes in atmosphere. Maybe the air feels lighter after you mop away spilled mead. Or perhaps the act of folding ritual cloths settles your own thoughts. Trust this. Your care shapes not just the physical space, but also what can unfold within it. Wonders aren't only conjured in the height of ritual, they are seeded in the moments between, in the quiet care of cleaning up, resetting, making ready for whatever comes next. So, next time you're scrubbing away the sacred detritus, chin up, You're not just housekeeping. You're attending a temple, and in that humble, holy labor, you might find the divine more present than ever before. Let me know if you wish to add further details, dialogue, or specific references to deities or rituals based on your transcript examples. Who's getting promoted to high priest? Was that divine thunder or just Tlacaelel's indigestion? Welcome to the break room, where whispers are currency and the sacred parrot knows everyone's secrets. Hover too close to the temple precincts in the hazy dawn, and you'll catch something far juicier than incense. Murmurs about last night's sacrificial scheduling snafu, who forgot to re-bless the obsidian knives again. And whether the calendar keeper's calculations have been a tad too thirsty for festival days lately. Priesthood, after all, is less a serene commune with the divine, and more a pressure-cooked steam bath of backstage deals, alliances, and the occasional artful sabotage, even if the sabotaged are only slippers switched out for the wrong ceremonial feather slippers. And that's just after breakfast. Hierarchies slither through the precincts tighter than a snake around a roasted maize. At the very top lounges the high priest, resplendent in starched plumage, tasked with channeling the god's intentions and negotiating the noble family's ambitions. Below him, a tangled ladder of subpriests, acolytes, and a bevy of specialists whose titles sound grand but mostly involve hefty scrolls and even heavier gossip. Promotions aren't simply about divine favor. They involve outmaneuvering your colleagues, dazzling during rituals, and, above all, cultivating just the right amount of proximity to whoever currently holds the ceremonial cocoa supply. Of course, no priestly ladder is climbed in silence. There are whispers about last week's botched divination, when an overeager apprentice misread a bundle of maize cobs and predicted, catastrophically, that the rain god would be arriving 3 days late to the festival. Enter damage control, emergency consultations, a hasty apology to the rain god's statue, and a rapidly scheduled party to appease the real power brokers, the temple support staff who know all the secrets. Then there are the great fiascos, chronicled in the unofficial annals, but laced with enough ritual incense to make anyone's eyes water. Take the time when a jealous junior priest swapped out the sacred parrot's ceremonial headdress for a distinctly undivine baking hat. The result? An inexplicably hilarious omen that led to a week-long debate on whether the gods wanted more cakes or fewer parrots. The priest never confessed, but the parrot's indignant squawks are still legendary. Beneath all the chaos, maneuvering and accidental culinary omens beats the heart of a thriving, if occasionally fractious community. Favors are traded, an extra scoop of scented oil here, a conveniently misplaced ceremonial bell there. Friendships and rivalries cross generations, and the lines between them often blur at festival feasts and in the subtle handoffs of sacred objects. Once, 2 young acolytes, allegedly rivals for the same mentor's attention, rescued a collapsing tapestry together mid-ceremony, earning joint commendations and a year's worth of raised eyebrows. The arrival of a new high priest always brings a fresh round of intrigue. Will he favor the austere tradition of dawn sacrifices, or swing toward more flamboyant, night-long rituals with better snack tables? The camps form instantly, complete with campaign slogans, more cocoa for all, sunrise forever, and subtle sabotage. Nothing like watching a ritual go joyfully off script because someone accidentally left out the mandatory jaguar figurine. Yet, through the storms of politics, rumors, and the weekly unexplained thunderclap, the priests always come together when it matters. The gods, it's whispered, have their own taste for drama, but they seem to respect teamwork, especially at crunch time. Or perhaps they just enjoy the spectacle. The sacred parrot, perched above, sees it all, muttering secrets, judging ceremonies, and, if you listen closely, perfecting a remarkable imitation of the former high priest's laugh. In the end, temple gossip isn't just idle chatter. It's the lifeblood of a world where sanctity and scandal dance cheek to cheek beneath the plumes and bells. Processions loom, citizens crowd the plazas, and everyone's got a question or a blessing to request. You wish for a PA system, or at least a little personal space. In the swelling din of voices, the pungent blend of incense and anticipation hangs heavy in the air. Every alley seems to produce more pilgrims, their candles flickering like restless fireflies. The devout stand shoulder to shoulder with the merely inquisitive, a democracy of presence united by curiosity or conviction, sometimes both. You spot a familiar face from the bakery, head respectfully bowed, and right beside her, a gaggle of schoolboys craning for a better look, apparently betting on whether the statue will really shed a miraculous tear this year. If only organisation could be conjured as easily as hope. The stewards, eternally outnumbered, attempt to shepherd the masses with fluttering banners and well-practiced gestures. Their faces are a study in determination, equal parts stern and benevolent, always just one request away from exasperation. You can't help but admire their stamina. Grannies, elbow, through the crowd, with the tenacity of marathon athletes, clutching embroidered handkerchiefs and reciting prayers under their breath, while the smartphone-wielding tourists hover at every edge, documenting the spectacle with an enthusiasm bordering on reverence. The challenge, of course, is keeping the sacred from dissolving into mere spectacle. Somewhere at the edge of the square, a hawker sells commemorative ribbons. The line blurs between pilgrimage and street fair. Laughter bubbles up alongside solemn chants. Children dart between legs. Their play a reminder that, holy or not, this is still a festival. You pause to marvel at the intermingling of the sacred and the everyday. Sober penitents, giggling teenagers, mothers balancing toddlers on tired hips, each moving according to their own private choreography in the grand procession. Commanding this teeming mass demands a delicate balance. Too little guidance, and devotion turns to chaos. Too much authority, and the living spirit of the gathering risks smothering under regulation. So you become, by default, an improvisational maestro, half mediator, half spectator, attempting to tune the mood of the crowd. Your tools are patience and a kind of practiced empathy, a gentle hand here, a firm word there, the ability to spot potential trouble before it ripples outwards. You witness quiet acts of kindness ripple through the throng, a stranger's steadying arm for someone wobbly on their feet, a bottle of water passed backwards from the front lines to those at the rear. If you watch closely, faith is present in these gestures too, not only in the formal benedictions, but in the solidarity of the press and the shared longing for meaning. There are moments when the press of bodies feels overwhelming. The city seems to fold in on itself, breathless under the sheer weight of expectation. It's in these moments you remember why the crowd arrives at all. Underneath the surface bustle, there is a hunger for connection, a belief that somewhere in this sea of faces, the sacred can be glimpsed, or touched, or felt. Managing the faithful and herding the curious is less about keeping order and more about honouring this shared pursuit. As twilight deepens and the last chant echoes off the old stone walls, the crowd begins to thin, leaving behind a tracery of candle wax and confetti. The square exhales at last. You catch your breath, aware that tomorrow will bring another tide of pilgrims, another surge of expectation. But for now, the city is quiet. A brief pause before the next procession, the next hopeful gathering. You straighten your shoulders, grateful, despite everything, for the company of so many, the faithful, the questioning, the hopeful, the stubbornly skeptical. They are, after all, what makes the crowd worth managing, year after spirited year. It's time for beans, a toli, and an impromptu session of Guess the Omen, starring a spilled cup as the main oracle. If only the gods could be a little more direct, like send an actual memo. But this is how it always goes. Noon rolls around, the sun is at its zenith, and the only thing more predictable than beans on the menu is how quickly someone insists on reading omens in the remains of their lunch. It starts small, just a casual glance at a blob of atole sliding lazily down the side of a gourd. But soon enough, everyone's craning their necks for a glimpse, debating whether that splash means rain, good fortune, or imminent disaster. In the ancient world, you can't even drink your gruel in peace without wondering if you're missing a message from a higher power. The assembled group, equal parts hungry and superstitious, gathers around the central fire. An older woman, part cook and part seer, sniffs loudly. She insists the bubbles in the atoll are auspicious. Next to her, a young apprentice is less easily convinced, prodding the soup as if it might respond with advice about tomorrow's harvest. Someone jokes that if the gods want their opinions known, they should try a thunderbolt next time. Laughter crackles through the group, a momentary release of tension that circles back to quiet anticipation as a particularly messy spill draws collective attention. Over in the corner, the self-proclaimed expert, who, yesterday, failed to predict his own missing sandal, proclaims he sees the jaguar, symbol of strength and night, in the scattered beans. Someone else claims it looks more like a duck. The group divides itself into Team Jaguar and Team Duck, as if the cosmos hinges on this culinary Rorschach test. It doesn't really matter. What matters is the thrill of reading the world's mysteries into lunch leftovers. Mysticism makes a good side dish to a simple meal. Even the high priest can't resist. He folds himself down with the rest, eyes half closed, murmuring something about the shape of fate in humble things. It is equal parts performance and genuine reverence, the kind of moment that blurs the line between the sacred and the everyday. Food has always been a bridge, across generations, between the mundane and the divine, and, today, between laughter and prophecy. A soft breeze carries the smell of maize and herbs, swirling with the faint hint of incense from the earlier morning rituals. A few people whisper that the breeze itself is a sign. The prevailing mood is lightly skeptical. No one is quite ready to wager next week's offerings on the pattern of refried beans. But, for a few minutes, everyone leans in. There's comfort in the ritual, in the idea that the universe might drop by for lunch, even just to spill a little atole on its way out. Eventually, the divination gives way to practical concerns. The beans are finished off, bowls wiped clean, and the group collectively shrugs. Perhaps the gods are in a cryptic mood today. The future remains stubbornly indecipherable, beans or no beans. As midday gives way to the slow pace of afternoon, someone sums it up best. Maybe the real omen is that we're here, sharing food and waiting for signs together. Heads nod. The spilled cup is forgotten, at least until tomorrow's lunch, when the age-old game of Guess the Omen will start anew. Because really, in a world built on uncertainty, both lunch and a little divination go a long way towards keeping hope alive. Let me know if you'd like adjustments or further tailoring to a particular mood or detail. Junior priests in training gather, eager to hear your stories about serpents, gods, and that one really unfortunate festival. You'd love to. inspire. But mostly, you just hope they take better notes than you did. Your sandals squeak, because of course they do. The only sound in the hush before the retelling of legend. The novices, all wide-eyed and gripping their wax tablets, sit in a half-moon around your sandals. No one sits in front after what happened last Tuesday. You're reasonably sure the stains are permanent. There's an air of nervous reverence. Maybe it's your seniority. Maybe it's the memory of your animated sacrifice demonstration last month. Or maybe it's just the toga that makes you look vaguely magical in the right shadow. First, you do what priests have done since the dawn of tradition. You begin with a simple question, the kind that makes a young acolyte sweat. What is the real meaning of the great serpent's dance? Blank faces. One muttered answer. You manage not to sigh. You remember being there. The truth is, you're painfully aware of which lessons stick and which ones flop. Like a fish left as an accidental offering, you're supposed to present the stories as crisp and authoritative, divine law, cosmic certainty. Instead, you relate the legends as you remember them, scented with burnt myrrh, muddied by your own doubts, and always coloured a little by the frantic improvisations of priests before you. Between you and the fresh-faced trainees, you know the rituals will survive. But whether anyone remembers why you dance anti-clockwise on Fridays might be another matter. You pass around ritual objects with practiced flourish, a bronze serpent amulet, missing a bit of tail found under your cot after last Beltane. And the ceremonial cup, scrubbed. But let's not ask with what. Each one comes with a now unskippable story. The great amulet theft, when you were blamed for the missing tail. The not-so-magic goblet, how a chipped cup accidentally turned water into fire wine. It was, in fact, fire wine all along. And that one really unfortunate festival. Details hush-hushed, but everybody knows. You notice the trainees writing faster as you embellish, adding details about sacred omens, and less about the cleanup afterwards. Each story, you remind yourself, is more than entertainment. These tales carry instructions coded in metaphor and in very literal warnings. Never leave sacrificial oxen unattended, you stress. And four heads nod solemnly, all doubtless remembering last spring. But you suspect most real learning won't come from sitting on stone benches. It'll arrive at dawn, hauling barrels up temple steps, or scraping wax off ancient hymn plaques while wishing you'd skipped that fifth honey cake. The heart of priestly education you try to impart is less about memory than interpretation. Reading the God's will from torn entrails, or a bent amphora. Knowing which mistakes are forgivable and which ones will haunt you every equinox. You pepper your lesson with encouragements. Tradition is important, but don't forget to question. Just maybe in the privacy of your own head, or after you've been promoted. The session closes, as these always do, with a ritual quiz. How many curses can the goddess heap on one person? The correct answer is, technically, infinite. But it's fun to watch them debate. There is laughter, nervous, relieved, genuine. You suspect, for all your worries, these novices might surpass you one day. That's the hope, and, depending on who you ask, the divine plan. As the novices file out, shaking out their cramping hands, you gather the debris of teaching. Broken chalk, half-doodled diagrams of serpentine gods, and one very confused amulet. Tomorrow, you'll do it again, hoping that somewhere between the stories, the rituals, and the laughter, the next wave learns not just what to believe, but how to believe. Or at the very least, how not to set their own robes on fire. Ever planned a wedding? Imagine that, plus fireworks, dozens of musicians, and a jaguar prowling around. One wrong step, and your headline news, if headlines were a thing. For those who've never stood in the centre of an ancient royal parade or juggled a sacred torch, here's a truth nobody tells you. Coordination is survival. In the modern world, event planners obsess over seating charts and whether the DJ will play Despacito one too many times. But for ceremony organisers of the past, things were literally life or death. If a ritual demanded the priest stand on the left, not the right, a nation's fate, or at least the priest's, could take a sharp downturn. Let's paint the scene. The air is thick with incense and expectation. Everyone is watching. The dignitaries, your king, maybe the gods if they're bored tonight. You have to sync the acrobat flipping through fire hoops with the star singer belting the hymn, while grandmothers from rival clans glare at each other across the dais. The drums start before the singers, or the tiger handler trips, and you're the new lead in a cautionary tale. Take, for instance, the famous Sun Festival of Tlatelolco. Dozens of coordinators met weeks in advance, mapping every footfall and feather. Step 1. Nobody gets gored by a sacred animal. Step 2. Don't set fire to the wrong offering tower. Simple, right? Wrong. Even after all the practice runs, some unsuspecting runner would mishear a drumbeat, start the sacrificial procession 5 minutes early, and suddenly priests are grabbing the wrong ceremonial daggers. Chaos, reputations, and appendages on the line. It's not just the logistics, it's diplomacy too. Some ceremonies demanded rival factions share the stage, or at least the altar. The chief scribe's son can't be upstaged by the architect's daughter, but both must pour their family's sacred wine at precisely the right moment. The wrong move could spark a feud bigger than the ceremony. As the coordinator, you're less event planner and more peace broker with a clipboard. What's remarkable is that, despite these high stakes, ancient ceremony coordinators rarely get the credit. There's no triumphal arch for best on-the-spot save of a fallen torch. Only rumours, mostly about the year when things went drastically sideways. If you did your job, the king looked good, the omens were favourable, and all anyone remembered were the fireworks. And let's not forget the behind-the-scenes disasters. Ancient sources whisper about processions where the order was accidentally reversed. Cue frenzy as priests try, in full ceremonial regalia, to jog discreetly to their proper places. One slip, and suddenly the parade is facing the wrong way, the crowd's on edge, and someone's promising never to volunteer again. You might wonder why anyone bothers with all this chaos. The answer is legacy and legitimacy. These rituals were history written in real time. Getting the choreography right meant a good harvest, a peaceful year, maybe even a new alliance. Mess it up, and the gods might not be the only ones angry. So next time you see a seamless state ceremony or a festival timed to the second, spare a thought for the unsung heroes coordinating chaos behind the curtain. Their legacy isn't etched in stone, but it's carried in every flawlessly timed drumbeat and in every tradition that, miraculously, survived another year. If you'd like the section edited for a different focus, pacing, or want more specific historical examples, just let me know. Time to satisfy demanding deities with perfectly orchestrated chants and dances. It's less spiritual transcendence, and more, don't trip head first into the sacred fire. But let's be clear. In the ancient world, ritual was less about individual enlightenment and more about putting on a performance you hoped the gods wouldn't find laughable. The stakes, rain, harvests, victory, plagues, general cosmic harmony. If the high priest flubbed a line or the lead dancer lost his rhythm, it wasn't just social embarrassment. It was possibly the cause of next year's locust infestation. No pressure. Priests and priestesses became expert directors in a never-ending show. Participation wasn't optional either. Attendance was mandatory for anyone within sacrificial smoke-smelling distance. Imagine your local temple as a stadium, packed with people trying not to yawn during yet another dawn to dusk ceremony. Some played instruments, others swung censers, and a brave few risked third-degree burns with pyrotechnic stunts. Everyone, from farmers to kings, was united in equal parts awe, boredom, and very real anxiety. After all, nobody wanted to be blamed if the rain failed to fall. Preparation for these rituals started days or even weeks in advance. Costumes, yes, costumes, were meticulously designed. Masks representing gods or spirits were carved or painted. Choreography was drafted, practiced, and, much like that uncle at your cousin's wedding, usually performed with varying degrees of grace and confidence. The wrong costume or a forgotten prop wasn't just a minor wardrobe malfunction, it was an omen, a potentially disastrous sign that the spirits were annoyed, or worse, laughing. The gods, ever the demanding critics, were believed to be as interested in the precision of your offering as the spirit behind it. A gold-plated statue and a half-hearted prayer. Not good enough. An off-key chant. Risky. A goat that refused to cooperate? Catastrophic. Ancient texts are filled with cautionary tales of poorly executed rituals replaced by, shall we say, more successful participants. Sometimes this meant exile. Other times, a starring role as next season's human sacrifice. On the flip side, perfect performances weren't just rewarded with cosmic favor. Participants got public prestige, communal feasts, and sometimes enough wine to make even the grumpiest of gods grin. So, were these ceremonies prayer, or were they performance art? The lines were blurred. Sure, there was faith. Chants droned from the depths of the soul, and censers swung with real belief. But there was also an understanding that spectacle mattered. The grander and more dramatic the display, the more pleased the gods. Ancient temples often doubled as theatres, with their grand steps and echoing halls, perfect for maximizing both smoke effects and dramatic acoustics. Think Broadway, but with less jazz hands and more goat's blood. And what about the audience? They weren't passive viewers. They clapped, they gasped, they joined in refrains, and sometimes they improvised their own prayers when the show looked like it might flop. Children squirmed, grandmothers sighed knowingly, and neighborhood gossips kept a mental list of which priest missed a cue, ready to bring it up when the weather turned sour. Any ancient believer would assure you that ritual was not a formality. It was the lifeline between mortal and immortal, a conversation where every costume stitch and symbol crash mattered. A successful ceremony was communal insurance against disaster and just maybe a step closer to being remembered not as the one who tripped over the altar, but as the hero who pulled off the perfect prayer. In the end, asking whether these rituals were prayer or performance is like asking if a thunderstorm is rain or spectacle. In the ancient mind, the answer was simple. For the gods to listen, humans had to put on a show worthy of divine applause. And everyone hoped, above all, to exit stage left with their dignity and eyebrows intact. Meetings with the boss are always nerve-wracking, especially when he's dressed like an eagle and hasn't slept in 3 days. You nod along, pretending you understand every third word. But this isn't just any boss. This is the high priest of Tenochtitlán, the man who claims his morning coffee is the blood of defeated enemies. His feathered headdress scrapes the ceiling as he circles the room, eyes wild, arms spread as if ready to launch into flight. or reprimand you with the full force of Huitzilopochtli, the god of war, whose statue glares at you from behind an altar. Today's agenda is less about quarterly productivity and more about rallying the city's best and brightest for the grandest festival of the year. Stifling a yawn and ignoring the faint smell of burning copal, or is that just incense? You try to focus as his voice rises and falls in booming rhythmic cadences. This is not your average PowerPoint presentation. It's a full sensory experience. Drum beats in the background, sun streaming through obsidian-slitted windows. Motivation. Aztec style. Instead of synergy or thinking outside the box, the high priest casts visions of destiny. He reminds you all that Tenochtitlan is not simply a city, but the center of the cosmos, upheld by the bravery and sacrifice of its inhabitants. Failure is not something that gets you a terse email. It's the sort of thing that requires a special ritual to apologize to the gods. Suddenly, your annual review doesn't seem so bad. The pep talk crescendos. He recounts tales of ancestors who braved the unknown, crossing mythical oceans, carving islands from snake-infested lakes, and negotiating with gods as easily as we request a calendar extension from IT. You realize your workload might actually be manageable compared to theirs. Each story is delivered with the kind of flair that would make a TED Talk sound like a weather report. The high priest's motivational style is equal parts awe-inspiring and intimidating. He paces, leaps onto platforms, and points dramatically into the crowd, locking eyes until you feel you might personally be chosen for some mysterious, sacred duty. The drummers intensify, keeping everyone's heart rate just below panic. He's full of ancient pro tips. Show up early, honor the gods, keep your obsidian knives sharp, and always, always eat your maize porridge. None of these tips, however, explain how you're supposed to raise the sun through prayer and collective willpower, but you write it down anyway. Group participation is non-negotiable. With a clap, he demands volunteers. Hands go up, some faster than others, everyone remembering the last time someone hesitated and ended up on early morning altar scrubbing duty. That, everyone agrees, is a fate worse than any spreadsheet audit. As the pep talk draws to a close, the high priest unveils his pièce de résistance, a startlingly lifelike replica of the sacred Templo Mayor, crafted from what seems to be corn husks and improbable optimism. Applause erupts, spirits soar. You're not quite sure if you've just been motivated or slightly terrified, but you do feel ready to march out and conquer whatever the day holds, be it an imperial rival, a treacherous chinampa, or just another stack of ceremonial paperwork. In the end, the high priest's pep talks aren't remembered for their detailed action plans or navigable bullet points. They're remembered because you leave feeling like the sun itself depends on your courage, faith, and a little bit of creative problem solving. A reminder that sometimes, even if you don't get the memo, you're an essential part of something far grander. And next time, you might even remember to show up with feathers of your own. Who knew burning copal could make you drowsy? The post-lunch haze sets in. You wonder if the gods can see you sneaking a quick power nap behind the altar. The air is thick, so thick you could almost carve your name in it with a stone knife. Sunlight slants through the columns, illuminating motes of incense smoke that swirl like tiny pyres around your head. Every 10 seconds, someone waves another chunk of resinous copal over the brazier, sending up a fresh plume. The warm, spicy aroma that felt sacred at dawn now curls in your nostrils and coats your tongue, adding to a lethargic sense of unreality. You blink slowly, eyelids drooping, and momentarily consider blaming the torpor on a mischievous spirit. Surely there's a patron god for mid-afternoon fatigue. Lunch should have brought new energy, but instead it's like it was spiked with poppy seeds. The corn cakes sit in your belly like bricks, and the mealy tamales have only deepened a creeping exhaustion. You catch yourself mid-yawn, subtly pinching yourself in a desperate attempt to stay alert. Maybe you shouldn't have gone for those extra beans. It doesn't help that the temple stone is warm, pleasant at sunrise, now almost cozy, lulling you toward sleep as you kneel in supposed meditation. The rhythmic chanting of the priests, which once pulled your spirit skyward, now seems engineered to lull listeners into a trance. You begin absent-mindedly tracing the cracks in the altar, wondering how many cycles of the moon it takes for a groove to wear itself into history. From the corner of your eye, you watch Tlaloc's acolyte unload yet another basket of incense. His face is calm, untroubled by thoughts of sleep or the meaninglessness of endlessly burning things. You briefly envy him. Maybe everyone else here is energized, caught up in the pageantry, while you are the only one about to drown in an existential crisis brought on by excessive aromatherapy. Instead, the shrine is a theatre of subtle struggles. Across from you, a teenage attendant fights a slow-motion battle with a drooping eyelid, surreptitiously propping up his head on his palm and nodding under the guise of deep prayer. An elderly matron dozes, disguised by her shawl, only to jerk awake at the sharp crack of the high priest's staff. At least you're not alone. Your thoughts wander. Did you remember to close the granary door? Did the dog ever stop barking at the reed fence? What if you slipped out for just a second and let the hot wind outside clear your head? Behind the altar, you weigh your escape plans, timing them to coincide with the next particularly smoky offering, while internally composing a prayer of apology for your inattention. The gods are supposed to see everything, right? Surely they know what it's like to be human and utterly, inexplicably sleepy at exactly the wrong moment. There's a murmur. Someone accidentally drops a shell rattle, which clatters across the flagstones, jarring everyone back to the present. You flinch, heart pounding, embarrassed by how acutely you wish for catastrophe. Fire, earthquake, rain of frogs, anything to punctuate the monotony. The afternoon slogs on. You warm your hands over the brazier and watch the swirling smoke attempt to spell out answers to questions you can't quite form. Maybe, you decide, the truly wise turn this drowsiness into a kind of trance, a semi-sacred state where visions might be glimpsed. Or maybe you're simply falling asleep on the job. With an internal promise to be more awake for the gods tomorrow, you stifle another yawn, straighten your robes, and try, once more, to look deeply engaged, while your mind floats somewhere between this world and dreams. At least you think, if anyone asks later, you can always blame it on the copal. Healing is part of the job, which mostly means applying herbs to mysterious rashes and telling people they probably won't die, but just in case, offer a chicken. Of course, there is an art to medical uncertainty, a bit of showmanship, a touch of confidence, and a willingness to apply bandages with an air of practiced seriousness. Take, for example, the case of the blacksmith's nephew. He came stumbling in with a nasty burn, an apologetic sheepishness in his eyes, and the faint aroma of singed eyebrows. I rummaged through my bag, retrieved the tried-and-true soothing salve, equal parts honesty and crushed yarrow, and, with the gravity of a town judge, smeared it on thick. Did it work? Not exactly. Did his aunt think I was some kind of village sage? Absolutely. Sometimes, perception is 9/10 of the cure. The more awkward part of the job, of course, involves diagnoses you'd rather leave to weather vanes and wishful thinking. There's always someone desperate for answers. What do you make of these itchy bumps? Or, should mucus really be that colour? These are the moments that require creative language and a deep reverence for the mysterious ways of the human body, and nature's ability to confound even the best prepared herbalist. It helps to have a ready list of possible causes: weather, spirits, bad cheese, disgruntled goats, and even more importantly, a list of plausible cures. Sometimes, a dramatic poultice is more effective than an actual remedy, especially if you instruct the patient to keep it on for exactly 3 rooster crows and no more. Medical duties also mean you are forever expected to carry a bottomless bag of supplies. Bandages? Never enough. Poultices? They go faster than you can crush the root. The true test of a healer's mettle is not in her knowledge of rare herbs, but in her ability to improvise with whatever the hedgerow offers when her stockpile is mysteriously empty. I've been known to use strips of linen, old shirts, and, on one memorable occasion, a somewhat resentful cat to keep a patient from scratching at their scabs. Flexibility is a virtue. Apologies to the cat. Let's not forget the ritual of bedside manner, the nervous, fidgeting relatives who want certainty and the stoic patients who refuse to admit their fevers. It is important, nay, essential, to look into the middle distance and nod thoughtfully. This is usually the point where you mention something wise about the moon's influence or the benefit of chicken soup. Whether or not you believe in either, a wise healer offers not just tinctures and teas, but also reassurance, hope, and, when necessary, a sharply worded warning. If you pick at that, don't come crying to me. Above all, a healer's reputation is built on the stories people tell later. No one remembers the routine scraped knee, but everyone remembers the time you cured the unlucky rash, or convinced old man Fennel to drink nettle tea for his digestive complaints. He now claims it improved his disposition, though the rest of us are not so sure. There's a certain magic in being associated with recovery, even if all you really did was suggest a rest and keep the patient's relatives occupied for a few hours. In the end, medical duties are less about certainty and more about trust. People want a healer to believe in something. Herbs, bandages, blessings, or just the possibility that things will turn out all right. As for me, I believe in the wisdom of watching, listening, and, when all else fails, offering a chicken to the unknown. Reading bird entrails. Still less weird than your family's group texts, but only just. You stare, you frown, you invent plausible interpretations. Let's be honest. Humans are terminally allergic to randomness. The first ancient who noticed a hawk swooping east just as his mother-in-law was visiting didn't chalk it up to just hawk things. Instead, he decided the two were probably related. Hence, omens were born, history's grand original game of Mad Libs, but with the stakes set at, should I plant barley or run for the hills? Interpretations varied, but the impulse was always the same. The universe must be communicating, right? Maybe it's just shy. We haven't changed much. Maybe you're not ready to carve open a goose, but you absolutely checked your horoscope last Tuesday. Yes, Virgo, that vague warning was probably about your passive-aggressive houseplant, palm leaves, tarot, algorithmic Instagram ads. The medium evolves. The message is forever cryptic. If the coffee foam forms a heart, you sigh wistfully. If you spot triple numbers on a license plate, obviously the cosmos is sending you a coupon code for destiny, but omens are stubbornly undismissible, even when you try. Suppose you're walking under a suspiciously enthusiastic flock of pigeons and one chooses your shoulder as its target. A rational person washes their sweater, a true omen interpreter. They pivot to Google. Pigeon droppings lucky. Because surely fate wouldn't waste that much embarrassment on nothing. In the lottery of the universe, even losing has prize potential. Our species isn't satisfied with mere patterns. We crave meaningful patterns. The shape of a cloud, a song on shuffle, your ex forwarding you a meme at exactly 11:11. That absolutely must mean something deeper. Coincidences are just omens in sportier sneakers. You tell yourself, don't be superstitious, just be a little stitious. And so, every missed subway or delayed email becomes a coded communique from life's customer service department. Let's take a classic. Dream omens. Throughout history, dream analysis has been a shadowy cottage industry. What did you see? A tree. Oh, that's excellent for goats. In modern times, we settle for feverishly decoding whether our teeth falling out means we're stressed or just that we should skip the taffy. The dream world is a 24-hour no-closure omens hotline. Each night you wake up, file your cryptic report, and never get to speak to the manager. But why do we put ourselves through this? Because life's just comforting when it has a narrator, even if the narrator is a capricious, multilingual fortune cookie. A world with omens is a world where our tiny choices ripple out, fetchingly echoed back by clouds or coins, or a mysterious itch on your left elbow. The universe, we decide, wants us to feel seen, preferably in the most mysterious, interpretive dance to explain it way possible. And let's admit, sometimes an omen is just an omen. The traffic light flips green, right as you finish pep-talking yourself. Your playlist shuffles to exactly the song you needed. Instead of brushing it off, you let yourself smile at the possibility, even as your skeptical brain folds its arms. Maybe the universe didn't send the message just for you, or maybe it did, but sent it in a group chat you never check. In the end, interpreting omens is less about decoding life's secret plans, and more about finding stories to tell yourself. Bird entrails or Twitter feeds, the medium changes, but the impulse remains. You search, you interpret, you grin ruefully when you're wrong, because the universe, like a persistent grandparent, never stops sending messages. It just hopes you'll reply, even if it's only with a well-timed LOL. When a noble wants a personal blessing, you nod solemnly and try not to spill water on their elaborate hairdo. Who knew priestly tact would be your number one skill? Navigating the whims of the elite is as much a rite of passage as any religious ceremony. Whether it's the emperor's quarter-annual appearance, or Lady Zamira demanding the temple's lilies bloom 2 weeks early, as an omen, the job of a priest puts one in the splash zone of aristocratic egos. Suddenly, what had always been a straightforward recitation feels a bit like juggling sacred vessels while someone throws gold coins at your feet, hoping, perhaps, to make you miss. Consider the emperor. When the royal entourage parades into the sanctuary, everything is heightened. The scents, the silks, the unspoken tension. Your fellow temple assistants scramble to straighten tapestries while you rehearse prayers, silently wishing not to sneeze during the incense blessing. The emperor expects divinity on demand, ornate sincerity, and perhaps a dash of prophecy if the mood is right. As the chosen officiant, you're more ornamental than oracular. Still, the gravity of your presence matters. Eyes flicker between you and the monarch, every syllable weighed, as if it might tip the fate of the empire. And then, there are the nobles. Each one arrives convinced their personal drama merits divine intervention. Lady Mirana seeks a charm for her son's faltering grades. Never mind, he spends half his studies on falconry. Lord Saros requests the most complicated incense blend. 3 resins, 2 foreign spices, and it must, absolutely must, be lit by the light of the setting sun. Occasionally their requests are endearing, in a circuitous way. A prayer for the safe return of a beloved hound, or a quiet blessing before entering court intrigue. More often, though, you must master the art of solemn patience, as every demand is delivered with the urgency of a pending apocalypse. VIP events involve more than maneuvering around egos. They require choreography. Documents must be prepared for signatures, sacramental items must gleam, and don't get caught quoting the wrong ancestor. Word gets around. All the while, you're expected to embody a serenity that borders on supernatural. Inside, of course, you may feel like a mouse sharing a banquet with lions. Occasionally, you'll receive a special request, an ambiguous phrase that covers everything from reading auspicious omens for a fledgling romance to officiating at a clandestine midnight ritual for a noble desperate to reverse a string of bad luck. Discretion is essential. So is an understanding that sometimes the trappings of the ceremony mean as much as the act itself. Nobles love symbols as much as they crave results. A bluish candle instead of the traditional white. It's tradition, if you say it with conviction. Once, a particularly superstitious viscount insisted on a blessing for his collection of exotic turtles. Another time, a duchess wept so theatrically for a rain prayer that even the statues looked sympathetic. In these moments, you learn to listen, to nod, and to occasionally invent a harmless ritual on the spot. A sprinkle of perfumed water, a whispered invocation, and a silent plea for patience to the gods. Success in these encounters is measured not only by ritual precision, but by your ability to create the illusion of serenity and omnipotence, regardless of your own misgivings, or the birds nesting somewhere in the rafters during prayer. Over time, your tact sharpens, your sense of theatre improves, and you realize, for the powerful, the process matters as much as the outcome. When the royal party departs and the nobility files out, you exhale quietly amid the lingering echo of ceremonial gongs. Perhaps you've changed destiny, or maybe you just blessed an overgroomed lapdog. Either way, you've survived another day as the calm at the center of the storm, wielding the twin magics of diplomacy and divine pretense. Now here's the extended 600-word segment as requested, using the provided initial paragraph and applying the above stylistic approach. Even priests need to chill. Sometimes you sneak away for a ball game or gather to retell the worst festival mishaps. Just don't get caught laughing at the wrong time. Because if there's one thing priests cherish more than perfectly recited prayers, it's those precious spaces between the rituals. The side moments where duty loosens its grip and the masks, the ceremonial ones at least, come off. The smoky hush of evening, a shared glance, someone pulling out a battered game ball that's rolled through sacred courts and muddy alleys alike. Sacred downtime. The phrase itself is a contradiction, and that's precisely the point. Picture this. Temple grounds after a particularly relentless festival. The air still thick with incense. The faint tang of roasting maize drifting past your nose. Supposedly, everyone's deep in silent reflection. In reality, half the priesthood is loitering beneath the obsidian lintels, elbows pressed into cool stone, arguing whether Topiltzin's disastrous song at last year's ceremony was a genuine curse or just a spectacular lack of talent. There's a peal of laughter, hastily stifled when the high priest sweeps past, face set like the moon in eclipse. Games, in this world, are far from mere distractions. Step out onto the ball court with your peers, and suddenly, all those strictures of rank blur a little. For a while, it's not about who recited what, or whose headdress caught fire during the sunrise prayers. Now, it's about the bounce of the leather ball, the grunt of effort, and maybe a thrown elbow. You'd never admit it to the acolytes, but the real competitive spirit lives here. Grudge matches that have less to do with holy protocol and more with who owes whom a round of pulk. And just maybe, losing with style is its own kind of sacred lesson. But downtime isn't only for bruises and breathless laughter. As dusk seeps into shadow, stories surface, some as old as the first sun, others crisp with the detail of last week's near miss with a teetering idol. The best tales blend both sacred and profane, wisdom wrapped in mischief. Like the legend of the priest who once swapped the temple puppet for a live toad during children's blessings, only to have the blessing hop straight up a nobleman's sleeve. The story grows in the telling, as all the best ones do, but everyone remembers the nobleman's face. And while the courtyard may echo with laughter and the occasional thud of an ambitious dive for the ball, there's another, quieter kind of downtime, a different flavour of escape. The temazcal. If the ball court is where you sweat out rivalry, here's where you sweat out the world. Another return, another cocoon. Steam and darkness, the sharp scent of herbs thrown on hot stones. You sit shoulder to shoulder, words sparse, the hiss of breath and water. Your only company at first. Then, gradually, confessions bubble up, secret doubts about tomorrow's ritual, memories of a lost friend, half-planned jokes for next year's feast. The walls melt away. For a few heartbeats, the troubles of pomp and position drain from your skin. This is the paradox. What makes downtime sacred isn't the games, the gossip, or the sweat, but the shared humanity behind it all. Even as daylight fades and formalities reassemble themselves, these pauses endure. Held in side glances, in inside jokes carried back to the world of liturgy and incense. Tomorrow, you'll don the headdress again, voice stern and spine straight. But tonight, you're just another soul breathing in the quiet, grateful for the levity that lives between the lines. Sacred downtime. Don't underestimate its power. Without it, the sacred would crack under its own weight, and who would be left to laugh at tomorrow's stories? As dusk falls, another round of ceremonies kicks in. Flames glow, drums echo, and every eye is on you. At least the soundtrack is better than your neighbour's karaoke. On the horizon, the last sliver of sunlight stretches like molten gold across the village commons. The anticipation is almost physical. Small children wiggle to the front. Elders lean on canes that thump a steady counter-rhythm to the drums, and a flock of hens attempts a last-minute sneaky raid on the offering plates before being gently redirected by an auntie with a rolled-up straw mat. It's the kind of gathering that effortlessly knits the entire community together, where even strangers get honorary status as cousin for the night. The air thickens with burning sandalwood, mingling with the sharp tang of approaching rain. A low chant begins, somewhere between a song, a prayer, and an inside joke. Only half the congregation seems to understand. You try to follow along but fumble the words. An elderly uncle grins and nudges you in encouragement, making it perfectly clear that enthusiasm counts for more than pronunciation tonight. Someone passes you a woven cup of spiced tea. You accept it, partly out of politeness, partly because you're freezing in your ceremonial outfit, which someone swore would be perfect for the evening weather. Then, right on cue, the chief ceremonial torch is lit. The flame bobs and weaves, snatching at shadows in the twilight, casting everyone's features into a dance of gold and blue. There's an invocation, long-winded, poetic, filled with references to mountain winds and ancestral rivers that always manage to skip your mind during pop quizzes. Yet, as the speaker's voice rises and falls, their words seem to press a hidden button in the sky. Stars appear, shy at first, then bold and jubilant. Children gasp so theatrically it could rival the most dramatic of soap operas. A second round of drums kicks up, faster this time. You find yourself swept along, a little hesitant, a little thrilled. The elders circle inward, moving with surprising agility, while the youngsters dart between, darting and laughing before settling into practiced steps. There's an irresistible pull to join in, Because here, no one cares about left feet or missed beats. They care that you showed up, tried, grinned at your neighbor. You remember to swing your hands in time with the music, which is immediately rewarded with a grandmotherly wink from across the fire. But every ceremony worth its salt court's chaos, and tonight's guest star is the weather. In an unscripted, almost mischievous gesture, the air cools suddenly. A small hush settles as the first splatters of hail announce themselves with a conspiratorial plink against the ceremonial drums. The head priest draws his cloak a little tighter, gives the sky a look that is half challenge, half resignation. A collective shrug ripples through the crowd. This wasn't in the program, but neither are the best memories. One of the kids squeals as icy pellets land in their hair, turning discomfort into spontaneous comedy. Under the hail's scattershot percussion, someone finds an old oilcloth. Others dash to rescue the offerings, and a cheekier group just dances harder, refusing to yield their patch of ground to the storm. Laughter and hailstones ricochet together. This is part of the rite too. Sometimes the 1,000-year-old traditions get a remix, courtesy of nature herself, and everyone's invited for the encore. The storytellers adjust their tales on the fly, splicing in asides about how sudden hail means lucky crops, or how a soggy ceremony is proof that the spirits approve. Eventually, the storm lets up as quickly as it began. The fires are coaxed back to life, and the night concludes with warm, sticky rice in banana leaves. Promises to remember this evening forever, or at least until next year. And the unspoken agreement that it's these unpredictable, messy moments that make the ceremonies truly unforgettable. Here, sunset rites are never quite the same twice. Whether under starlight, hail, or the lingering scent of sandalwood, these evenings stitch together a tapestry of memory that no karaoke night could hope to match. It's beans again, but with lively chat about cosmology, livestock, and whatever outrage happened in the plaza today. You dream of a world with less standing. A bowl of beans is reliable, at least in the way gravity is reliable. The night unfurls with familiar clatter. Cutlery grazes clay, chairs scrape stone, and an elderly uncle launches into the tired anecdote about the chicken who outlived 3 of his ex-wives. Across the table, your neighbour gestures with her spoon, positing that the stars are God's breadcrumbs, left, so we'll never lose our way home. It's an upgrade from last week's theory that celestial bodies are nothing more than glowing sheep kicked into the sky by Poseidon. You catch snippets of debate ricocheting over the breadbasket. Whether goats or cows are the more moral animal. Whether today's outrage in the plaza, apparently a baker shortchanged a magistrate, will become tomorrow's outrageous law. There's always a current of mild skepticism, swirling with laughter. Arguments only truly ignite once the plates are half empty and the last crust has been coveted, then filched. Underneath the casual philosophy, there's a rhythm of complaint, mostly about feet. Everyone's aching. Boots weren't made for cobblestones, sandals even less so. Your aunt removes her shoes, unabashed, revealing heels scored by the day's errands. She waves them like banners. Her story of the day she walked all the way to the grain mill and back, twice, with only a short rest under the laurel tree, receives the admiring grunts of those who know the pain. Someone always has a worse foot story. The local wisdom is that calluses are badges of honor, and blisters are just the universe's way of keeping you humble. As night deepens, talk swings toward the metaphysical. Someone asks whether it matters what kind of beans we eat, since all matter is ultimately stardust. The older generation hums approval. Beans, souls, stars, all cycling through the universe in a grand cosmic soup. Your cousin refutes this. If I eat enough beans, I'll orbit Jupiter by morning. Mild laughter ripples. It's honest, hearty, a small act of resistance against the grinding repetition of peasant life. The food itself is never the star. Beans are background music. The conversation is the show. There's consolation in communal irony. That so much can be discussed. The origins of morality, the fairness of the mayor's new tax, the possibility of a world with soft grass everywhere to nap upon, and so little can ever be solved. Talk circles, repeats itself, wanders, but never really ends. It dissolves into yawning, into someone rising first, stretching sore legs, muttering about early markets and chores. You sometimes envy the philosophers in their ivory towers, but you know their feet almost certainly hurt less. What even is philosophy if not the search for a reason to sit down? Here, everyone has at least one grand hypothesis a night, spoken over beans, dissected between mouthfuls. If the feet are unhappy, the mind wanders further. The night closes with a small, shared silence. Candles gutter. The sky is, once again, a black dome flecked with possibilities. Someone tells you to walk it off, whatever aching or bewilderment you feel. And you nod, knowing you'll be back at the same table tomorrow night. Beans again, stars again. Another round of theories about the purpose of suffering and the possible benefits of sitting in a hot footbath with mint leaves. You rinse your bowl, stretch your toes, and step carefully toward the cot. Head swirling with beans, banter, and the dim comfort that, just maybe, tomorrow's talk will bring a cure for sore feet, or at least a distraction as delicious as tonight's laughter. You check the midnight offering, ward off spiritual and actual pests, and hope you remember to close the temple doors. Nothing like a jaguar prowling the storage room at 2 a.m. The final tasks before night descend in layers. Your feet are sore, your mind a little foggy from the incense and the dusk rituals. Yet, the day is not done. In these last moments before darkness settles, the boundary between the physical and the spiritual feels especially thin. Maybe it's the way the shadows pool in the corners of the courtyard, shapes shifting with every flicker of torchlight. Maybe it's the silent expectation that hangs over the offerings. Fruit, maize, pulque, inviting both gods and creatures of the underbrush. Your hands move by habit, brushing off the altar's corners, checking for stray crumbs. The priests always debate what's worse, luring ants, or offending the spirits with a careless mess. You whisper a half-hearted apology to both as you flick a beetle outside. The night is alive, pulsing, never quite still. Somewhere out near the trees, a cicada starts its relentless song. Somewhere closer, something larger, hopefully just a tapir, rustles in the palmetto leaves. Locking up is a strange ritual in itself. The heavy doors, carved with stories of night gods and monsters, make a satisfying thud when you seal the entrance. You count off the latches, double-check the bronze fastenings. There was that one time last festival when a band of raccoons ransacked the pantry. There was that other time, harder to forget, when a jaguar's yellow eyes flashed in the torchlight, just beyond the inner gate. There's a reason the cats have their own prayers, their own appeasing chants, tucked into the daily liturgy. Night fears are contagious. You know old Yaksun can't sleep until every ember in the fire pit has burned down to ash. You think of the younger novices, still convinced of ghosts in the hallway, the way the wind speaks in syllables when it passes through the cracked lintels. Just superstition, maybe, but everyone, priest and porter alike, makes a quick sign or mutters an extra line of protection under their breath. The darkness is seeded with stories about spirits who slip through doorways left ajar, about ancestors who visit in dreams, about curses left behind by enemies of the old city. Before you head to your own pallet, you pause by the threshold, listening. Is that soft patter rain, or the claws of something seeking shelter? You set out a dish of copal at the crossroads, a final bribe for uneasy gods and prowling shadows. Sometimes you think the temple is alive, breathing with the rhythm of prayers and fears. Sometimes you wish the night were a little quieter. Tonight, like every night, you do what you can and trust that the walls, stone and spirit both, will hold. You check the locks one last time, murmur a final invocation, and slip inside. The memory of that jaguar keeps you alert, one eye open, always. The world tilts towards sleep, but here, at the threshold of gods and jungle, rest comes in fits. There is, after all, always something out there, with teeth or with tails, waiting for a door to open. Tenochtitlán glows under the moon. You wander the causeways, ponder the mysteries of existence, and quietly hope tomorrow's schedule changes. The day's bustle has ebbed, replaced by an unfamiliar hush. The wide-eyed market crowd melts into shadowed arches, their voices fading like the last notes of a flute. You are left with the soft slap of your sandals, the gentle hum of water lapping against the stone-edge causeways, an occasional burst of laughter drifting from somewhere just out of sight. Above, the moon hangs like a silver coin high above the temple tops, casting its cool glow over rooftops and canals alike. You pause and breathe in the perfume of the night. Charred maize, distant fruit, and the sharp tang of lake water. Somewhere nearby, the incense from a forgotten altar drifts down to your path, sweet and smoky all at once. Somewhere further away, another world stirs, a secret Tenochtitlán, known only to those who choose or dare to listen after dark. Down a side street, musicians gather in a tight knot, their silhouettes flickering in torchlight. A drum thrums softly. A reed flute sings, its tune loose, playful, haunting. You drift closer, pulled in by curiosity and a sense that, perhaps tonight, you are meant to be more than an observer. The musicians wave you over, and before you know it, you are swaying along with the rhythm, laughing at the unfamiliar cadence, letting the music loosen the last remnants of day's anxieties. There are stories too, always stories. Old woman at the canal's edge spins a yarn about lunar jaguars and the dangers of swimming at midnight. You nod along, smiling, as much at her wild gestures as her tale. Further along, a couple shares a secret by the water, heads bent together, the sheen of moonlight ghosting their outlines. They quiet as you pass, and then pick up, soft as the night itself. Everywhere, life breathes, just beneath the surface, unseen by the day's officials and officials in training. Walking onward, you find an old fisherman setting out on his boat. He mutters a greeting, half in jest, half invitation. Night fish listen better, he claims, face creased with knowing. For a moment, you contemplate climbing aboard, drifting out into the limitless shimmer of stars reflected in the lake. Maybe you will, maybe not. The city is full of choices at this hour, all of them equally possible and none with obvious consequences. The temples, so commanding in daylight, shift into something softer, more enigmatic by moonlight. Their massive outlines melt into shadow. Their origins seem older, their stones storing memories not for the first time nor the last. You climb a low step to sit, marveling at the interplay of stone, shadow, and sky. Far above, a single priest tends to a torch, moving with reverence reserved for these nighttime rituals. You wonder what prayers drift toward the heavens at this hour, what secrets are whispered only to the moon, what offerings gently smoulder on unseen altars. The city, you realize, never really sleeps. It just changes moods. The pace slows, the rules bend, and the boundaries blur. Things unspoken by daylight slip through cracks in the walls. Small rebellions are planned in corners or played out with sly smiles and midnight dares. It is in these quiet, liminal hours that Tenochtitlan reveals its softer underbelly, its unofficial rituals, the poetry of its everyday survivors. Eventually you stroll homeward through tangled streets, half remembering the lauded plans for morning. In the moonlit city, with your feet tired and your eyes full of phosphorescent dreams, you realize that sometimes it's the unexpected and unstructured moments, the after-hours adventures that make history real. And with that thought, you turn toward a well-deserved sleep, just as the first hint of dawn begins to cool the stars above the moonlit city. As you finally crawl into bed, you replay the day's highs, lows, and improbable survivals. You're exhausted, grateful, and quietly relieved that tomorrow is, in fact, not the end of the world. Probably. But as you sink into your mattress, or straw mat, or stone cot, whatever passes for comfort, the emotional tumble dryer begins its cycle. Relief swirls with an odd, prickly guilt. Were the gods really satisfied with today's offerings? Did you miss a cryptic omen in the smoke? And why do you still feel a faint ember of guilt, even after a day spent running, chanting, pleading, and occasionally sprinting wildly from angry animals, disgruntled nobles, or, on a bad day, both at once? On the positive side, your battered feet and weary voice have earned you something that shouldn't matter, but somehow does. Reluctant bragging rights. You survived another festival. Your colleagues, those still upright, exchange glances of mutual respect. The camaraderie of the almost struck by lightning. Remember when the Quetzalcoatl altar nearly caught fire and nobody even screamed? Someone might remark. Sure, the glory is short-lived. By tomorrow, new crises, new eclipses, new royal edicts, new public complaints about the quality of incense will edge out today's close calls. But for tonight, pride lingers. You did it. You kept the sun climbing and the city breathing, and didn't drop the obsidian knife at the worst possible moment. Yet gratitude threads through the exhaustion. It's not just that the world didn't end, it's that you got to see another sunset, hear the faint laughter from distant courtyards, maybe wonder what your own family is eating for dinner without you. For all the grandeur and terror of the day, you're grateful most for these small, quiet gifts, the cool night air, the familiar weight of your old headdress slung over a chair. It's seen better days. The ache in your legs that means you ran hard and made it back. And if you're honest, you're even grateful for the guilt. It means you care. It means you haven't grown numb to the stakes, as heavy as they sometimes feel. In the dark, your mind wanders to the names and faces of those you helped and those you couldn't. You made choices today, some right, some wrong, and you hope the gods weigh context as well as action. You recall your mistakes with a wince, the words you fumbled, the ritual you almost forgot, the look in a novice's eyes when you snapped just a touch too harshly. The guilt is like a shadow, persistent, but somehow more manageable at night when nothing more can be done. And yet, tucked within it all is a secret satisfaction. You're part of something cosmic and absurd, terrifying and awe-inspiring. You swing between feeling like a powerless pawn and the linchpin of the universe, responsible for the fate of millions, and also just trying to find your other sandal in a pitch-black room. It's a wild, exhausting ride, and yet you wouldn't trade it. Because tomorrow, sun willing, you'll get to do it all again. Maybe it's not so different from today. Tomorrow will bring its own anxieties and hopeful omens, its own missteps and bravado. But for now, you allow yourself the luxury of a reluctant grin. You survived. You performed. You bore the guilt, felt the gratitude, and, even if you'd never admit it out loud, earned one more story to tell, or at least one more epic sigh to share with your fellow survivors over tomorrow's watery morning cacao. So tonight, as you tuck yourself into clean sheets, surrounded by silence, and maybe the soft buzz of streetlights, give a gentle nod to the tireless, slightly frazzled Aztec priests of history. They woke with the sun and didn't rest until the last star blinked out. They kept their world spinning, through omens, bloodied sandals, and more ceremonial headdresses than should really be legal. Because history's greatest secret is that everyone, no matter the city, the era, or the deity in charge, was just trying to make it through the day without dropping the ball, the blessing, or the ceremonial drum. So next time you grumble at your morning alarm, remember, somewhere in the past, someone woke even earlier, put on a feathered cape, and hoped desperately not to anger the sun. Sleep well, and may your dreams be free of jaguar attacks, stubborn incense, and unexplained calendar math. Good night. So tonight, as you tuck yourself into clean sheets, surrounded by silence and maybe the soft buzz of streetlights, give a gentle nod to the tireless, slightly frazzled Aztec priests of history. They woke with the sun and didn't rest until the last star blinked out. They kept their world spinning, through omens, bloodied sandals, and more ceremonial headdresses than should really be legal. Because history's greatest secret is that everyone, no matter the city, the era, or the deity in charge, was just trying to make it through the day without dropping the ball, the blessing, or the ceremonial drum. So next time you grumble at your morning alarm, remember, somewhere in the past, someone woke even earlier, put on a feathered cape, and hoped desperately not to anger the sun. Sleep well, and may your dreams be free of jaguar attacks, stubborn incense, and unexplained calendar math. Good night.